Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about my boobs after breastfeeding. I wanted to make this a separate video for my breastfeeding story, my breastfeeding journey, because I think it deserves its own video. I have a lot to say. A lot of women, first-time moms, are so curious about how breastfeeding is going to change their body. Before I talk about what my boobs look like now, it is important to know a little bit about my relationship with my boobs and my boobs in general before a baby. Like, here we go into like one of the probably the more awkward videos I've ever filmed. I've always had a smaller chest and that never bothered me. It really didn't. I was a dancer growing up. I was in the performing arts, and so for me it was actually perfect. I'm very active and they never got in the way. As a dancer, always in leotards, tight-fitting clothes, I actually preferred that I didn't have a big chest. I didn't have to wear multiple sports bras. I felt very comfortable. I also always had a more muscular body, and I'm short, and so I always thought like, okay, like for me this just works. Like it fits with the rest of my body. Like I'm good. I will say I was kind of excited when I got pregnant to see what was gonna happen to my boobs, and were they gonna grow, were they gonna swell, what were they gonna look like. My boobs definitely grew. My milk, they grew, but they definitely weren't like as huge as I thought they were gonna be. I thought they were gonna be ginormous. I think I got up to like probably, I was probably like a big B, small C cup, and normally I'm about an A. Then breastfeeding happened, and I did notice, as most women do, after you give birth, your areolas get huge, like so huge and so dark, and it sort of like happened overnight. I was really surprised. Like throughout my pregnancy, yes, they got bigger and darker, but after I gave birth, oh my gosh, if you are pregnant now or not pregnant yet, never had a baby, just know your areolas will get so big and so dark. And it's like, I mean, it's so that because baby's eyesight in those first few months is still developing. They can't really see. So the whole point is that baby can see that dark shade and be able to find your boob, be able to find milk, which is really cool, really cool. But that was really jarring. So anyway, it was breastfeeding and producing milk. If you haven't seen my breastfeeding story, I'll link that because that's important to see, to kind of understand the whole journey. But I stopped breastfeeding on my right side and then started exclusively breastfeeding off my left side. So you can only imagine what then happened to my boobs. My boobs got so lopsided. Like my right boob, like just flat, right? Like it stopped producing milk, it was flat. My nipple shrunk back to its almost original size, and my nipples to begin with were like small. Like I had pretty small, like very almost like adolescent looking nipples, and so it shrunk back down to like the size of a quarter, where the nipple on my left side was like the size of a small like tea saucer, like huge. And so there were months where I thought, oh my gosh, this looks insane. This looks insane. My left boob was so big, my areola was so big, my right side was so small. So when I eventually stopped breastfeeding altogether, I was like, oh my gosh, am I gonna have one boob that's bigger than the other forever? Because the disparity in sizes was like insane, because I had been breastfeeding exclusively for about 4 months on my left side and not on my right. And I had people telling me like, yeah, like, you know, that's gonna happen, like your boobs are probably gonna stay that way. And then I did have some people say like, no, they'll go back to how they were, and they'll like sort of even now. And I mean, for the most part, most women have one boob that's a little bit smaller than the other, and I had that too. Like that wasn't what bothered me. It was more so the idea that like one boob was gonna be ginormous versus the other. And I had never, up until this point, never considered plastic surgery or like a boob job. And at that point I was like, oh my gosh, I might legit have to get a boob job because this is going to look so insane. So stopped breastfeeding around 8 months, 8.5 months, and then it took till about, I want to say maybe like 10 or 11 months for my left boob to shrink down to size. So now we sort of arrive here. My son is turned one. I haven't breastfed for about 4 months. What do my boobs look like now? Well, I will say, thank goodness, and like here is some hope for all like my friends out there. thank goodness my boobs returned back to their normal size. My left boob shrunk back down to match my right, and now, like, although they definitely like look worn and look like they've been through it, they are now relatively the same size again. They're back to, like, in terms of size, they're back at the same ratio they were before baby. They're the same size too, I would say, before baby. However, the difference is in volume. So now they legit look like deflated balloons. So like a deflated, wrinkly balloon, that's what my boobs look like. And it's interesting because I thought that, like, because my boobs were so small, I was like, there's no way, like, what's gonna come out of them? Like, what's gonna deflate? What's gonna be missing? There's nothing there. But somehow there was something there, and there was something that got so sucked out of them that now they're so deflated. And what I mean by deflated is, it's really interesting, like, and I can't like show you on the internet, but like if I were to lean over, instead of my boobs like having a lot of volume even though they're small, now they're like just deflated sandbags. Like you could just like, they almost just feel like skin. That's probably like the biggest change that I've seen. Also, my nipples look a little strange, like my nipples themselves. I had flat nipples before I got pregnant and gave birth, and I didn't really know what that meant, but I did understand or like know that like my nipples looked pretty adolescent in comparison to like other women and like, you know, like other boobs I had seen in my life. So what happens is, like, when you're pregnant or like when you give birth and baby's breastfeeding, the baby pulls your nipple out of like your areola to suck on and like get milk. And I had flat nipples, which meant my nipples were really hard to pull out. Like baby had a really hard time. I had to use nipple shields, and nipple shields used the power of suction to like pull the nipple out so that my son could have breast milk. So what ended up happening was the areola like stretched out, obviously, and my nipple got stretched out. So when I was done breastfeeding, and what my boobs kind of look like now is like the areola has sunk back, but almost like inverted itself. So now like it almost looks like my whole nipple is like collapsed in on itself. It's really, I've described like more pleasant, pretty things in my life, but that's the truth. It probably sounds worse than it looks, but it is interesting, and it is something that my boobs didn't look like that before, essentially. So if you have flat nipples to start, and a lactation consultant in the hospital where you give birth will totally like go through all of that with you. And so if you're like, oh my god, I have no idea what that even means, like I don't know what flat nipples are, inverted nipples, like how do I know? A lactation consultant, or you could talk to your doctor about it beforehand, before you give birth. You could even possibly try to meet with a lactation consultant before you give birth. Like they'll be able to educate you on that. I had no idea that I had flat nipples, and it wasn't until afterward and after breastfeeding that obviously I've seen the results of like what breastfeeding has then done to my nipples. They just look a little more collapsed in on themselves than they did before, and they look a little worn. They look a little used and tired, but that's obvious. In a nutshell, what my boobs look like now, and the biggest difference I've seen, which is just that they look tired and saggier than they did before. So yeah guys, I mean, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed this. So random, but I think the more we can kind of pull back the veil on all of these subjects that surround giving birth and raising kids, I think it'll just like make us all feel a little bit less alone. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.